Late at night, my daughter-in-law took my gold necklace, earrings, and cash from my locker. They thought I knew nothing, but I was quietly waiting for them to make one fatal mistake. Hello, my dear listeners. Before I begin my story, I would be very happy if you subscribe and hit the like button. Please write in the comments which city or country you are listening from. Now, enjoy the story. My name is Margaret Lewis, and at this stage of my life, I have learned one thing very well. Real changes never announce themselves loudly. They arrive quietly and sit in your living room like a guest who overstays. I came from a family where money was never discussed loudly, but discipline was taught every day. My parents taught me to save before I learned to spend, and to watch people before I trusted them. That lesson stayed with me longer than any jewelry I ever owned. When my son Daniel got married to Clara, I welcomed her with respect. Not forced kindness, real calm respect. I told myself this was a new chapter, a time to step back and let the younger generation build their lives. But something shifted after the wedding. It wasn't words. It was attention. Clara began noticing things in my home that others never did. And her mother, Evelyn, noticed even more. They noticed my earrings. They noticed my necklace. And slowly, almost carefully, they noticed me. Or rather, what I owned. At first, I told myself I was imagining it. After all, age teaches you not to jump to conclusions. But experience teaches you not to ignore patterns. Every visit after the marriage felt slightly different. Longer pauses, lingering glances, questions that didn't need answers. I remained polite. I remained quiet. Because when people start watching your belongings more than your face, they are already telling you who they are. And that was the moment. Long before anything was taken, when I knew my life was about to test my patience, those glances turn into praise. And praise becomes the first step toward intention. After Daniel's marriage, visits became more frequent. At first, I thought it was normal. New families often cling together before they learn how to breathe separately. But soon, I noticed a pattern that didn't sit right with my spirit. Whenever Evelyn entered my home, her eyes moved before her words did. She would greet me politely, take a seat, accept tea, and then her gaze would travel. Always the same path, from my face to my ears, then down to my necklace. "Margaret," she would say softly, "these earrings are beautiful." I thanked her. The next visit, the compliment came again. And again. Always slow, always thoughtful. Her praise never felt light. It felt weighed. One afternoon, she leaned closer than usual. "Gold like this," she said, lowering her voice, "people don't keep anymore." I smiled. What I didn't say was this: people who don't keep such things don't know how much patience it takes to earn them. Clara watched quietly. She didn't praise. She observed. When I stood up, she stood too. When I walked toward my bedroom, she followed with her eyes. One evening, as I adjusted my necklace, she said, "It suits you. Very classic." Classic, another word people use when they mean valuable. I noticed how her eyes paused not on me, but on the corner of the room where my locker rested quietly, pretending to be furniture. That locker had been there for years. No one ever asked about it before. Now every visit it felt less invisible. I never confronted them. Age has taught me that questions alert people too early. Silence gives them space to reveal themselves. So I smiled. I poured tea. I listened. And every compliment they offered I accepted calmly, while filing it away in the careful place where wisdom lives. Because praise that repeats itself is rarely admiration. Sometimes it is preparation. Watching turns into measuring, and measuring turns into planning. There comes a moment in every elder's life when you must decide whether to speak or to watch. I chose to watch, not because I was unsure of myself, but because I was sure of human nature. When praise repeats itself too often, it stops being kindness. It becomes calculation. I noticed how Evelyn adjusted her chair slightly each time she visited, always angling herself toward my bedroom. I noticed how Clara memorized the rhythm of my day. When I rested, when I prayed, when I locked my door. These were not accidents. Still, I said nothing. At my age, confrontation wastes energy. Observation builds clarity. I began paying attention to the smallest things. Which drawer Clara glanced at? How Evelyn's conversation paused whenever I moved toward my room. How their visits always ended with one last look. Not at me, but at what surrounded me. I asked myself one quiet question. If I speak now, what will they learn? They would learn to hide better. So instead, I allowed comfort to grow around them. Comfort makes people careless. I laughed at the right moments. I welcomed them warmly. I behaved exactly as they expected an elderly woman to behave. Unaware, gentle, distracted. Inside I was alert. My silence was not fear. It was strategy. Because when people believe you are not watching, they reveal everything you need to know. Watching ends. And the night teaches me exactly how far intention can go. That night arrived quietly. No warning, no noise. I went to bed the way I always did, slowly, carefully, with my thoughts settled. I placed my earrings where I always placed them. I set my necklace beside my bed. Everything looked normal, but my spirit stayed awake. Sometime deep into the night, I felt the room change. Not a sound, a presence. Footsteps that knew the floor. Breathing that stayed controlled. I kept my eyes closed. At my age, you learn how to separate fear from awareness. This was awareness. I felt fingers near my ear. Gentle, confident. Hands that had touched me before. The earrings slid out smoothly. The necklace followed. No shaking. No hesitation. That told me everything. This was not impulse. This was rehearsal. I sensed Clara move toward my dresser. The drawer opened. The soft sound of wood. The key was taken. I lay still. People think courage means action. Sometimes courage means restraint. I listened as she left the room. I listened as the house returned to silence. Only then did I open my eyes. The space beside my bed felt lighter. Not empty, lighter. I did not cry. I did not rush. Because that night confirmed what weeks of watching had already taught me. They were not guessing. They were executing. And now I knew exactly where this path was heading. Morning comes, and I choose calm when others expect collapse. Morning light entered my room the way it always did. Soft, patient, unhurried. I sat up slowly and reached for my earrings out of habit. My fingers touched air. The necklace was gone too. The room looked the same. The bed was neat. The window was closed. Nothing appeared disturbed. And yet something essential was missing. I walked to the locker. The door stood exactly where it always stood. But the quiet weight behind it, that deep sense of presence, was no longer there. $5 million, saved carefully over decades, had vanished without a sound. I made myself tea. People expect elders to panic when something valuable disappears. They expect tears, raised voices, urgent phone calls. I offered none of those things. Instead, I sat at the table and listened to the house breathe. Later that morning, Daniel came in, his face already tense. He had noticed the change before I spoke. "Mom," he said, trying to stay calm, "something's wrong." I nodded. When I told him what was missing, his voice rose immediately. "We need to report this right now." I placed my hand on his. "No," I said quietly. "Not yet." He stared at me, confused, almost hurt. At that moment, I realized something important. Calm unsettles people more than anger ever could, because calm suggests preparation. I went about my day as usual. I cooked. I rested. I answered Clara's questions with the same gentle tone I always used. She watched me carefully. She was waiting for a reaction that never came. And in that waiting, her confidence grew. My son pushes for action. And I reveal just enough to stop him. By the second day, Daniel could no longer contain himself. He walked back and forth across my living room, his hands moving faster than his thoughts. I had seen that walk before. When he was a child and didn't know how to fix something he had broken. "Mom," he said again, lowering his voice this time, "this isn't small. Someone took your jewelry. Someone took your money." I looked at him carefully. At that moment, he wasn't a man arguing with a decision. He was a son trying to protect his mother the only way he knew how, by reacting. "I will call the police," he said. "Right now." I raised my hand. Not sharply, not angrily, just enough. "Daniel," I said calmly, "you will not do anything." He stopped walking. The room felt heavier after that sentence. Why? He asked, almost whispering. Why would you wait? I held his eyes. Because sometimes, I said slowly, action too early destroys the truth. He didn't understand. Not yet. I asked him to promise me one thing, that he would stay away from this matter completely. No questions. No confrontations. No quiet investigations of his own. That request hurt him more than I intended. You don't trust me? He asked. I shook my head. This isn't about trust, I said. This is about distance. I watched him leave my house that day carrying confusion on his shoulders. It wasn't fair to him, but wisdom is rarely fair in the moment, because if Daniel got involved, emotions would speak before evidence, and emotions protect family, not truth. That evening, Clara checked on me. She asked gentle questions. Careful questions. I answered with calm silence. She smiled, relieved. And in that relief, I knew my choice had been the right one. The reason for my calm becomes clear, because this was never an unplanned wait. People often think calm appears suddenly. It doesn't. Calm is built, quietly, long before it is needed. Years ago, I learned that wealth changes the way people listen to you. Some listen with respect. Others listen with intention. That is why, months before anything went missing, I hired Thomas Reed. Not because I suspected my family, but because I respected reality. Thomas was not loud. He did not ask unnecessary questions. He simply watched. I asked him to observe visits, movements, patterns. Nothing dramatic. Nothing illegal. Only record, I told him. And follow if they ever cross a line. That was all. So when the night came and my belongings disappeared, I was not starting from zero. I was continuing. While Clara and Evelyn believed my silence meant confusion, Thomas was already working. He followed quietly. He documented carefully. He waited patiently. I never checked on him. I never rushed him. Experience has taught me that truth arrives faster when you stop chasing it. That week, I behaved normally. I laughed when Clara spoke. I listened when Evelyn praised my home. They relaxed. They believed they had succeeded. And that belief, that dangerous comfort, was exactly what I needed. Silence speaks back. When evidence finally comes to my table, on the 7th evening, Thomas asked me to meet him. He chose a quiet place. No rush. No drama. That told me the truth was ready. He placed a small folder on the table between us. Inside were photographs, timestamps, and notes written with steady hands. They sold the gold, he said gently, at a shop known for buying stolen gold. I did not react. I had waited long enough to understand what patience feels like when it finally pays you back. He explained everything slowly, how the shop operated, how questions were avoided, how transactions were made quickly and quietly. Then he showed me the footage. 2 women. Clear faces. Clear movements. There was no confusion. No doubt. I recognized their posture before their faces. Confidence has a way of exposing people. I listened without interrupting. Elders don't rush truth. We let it finish speaking. When Thomas finished, he waited. What would you like to do next? He asked. I closed the folder. Now, I said calmly, we do this properly. For the first time since that night, I felt no weight in my chest. Because once evidence enters the room, fear quietly leaves. I walk into a police station. Not with anger, but with certainty. The police station was quieter than I expected. Not silent. Just steady. That suited me. I did not rush my words. I did not raise my voice. I placed the folder on the desk the same way I placed everything in my life. Carefully, I explained what had happened. Slowly, in order. The officer listened. Not with surprise. With attention. That matters. When I finished, I stood up. I would like you to come with me, I said. There is a shop. They came. The gold shop looked ordinary from the outside. Bright lights. Clean counters. A place pretending to be honest. Inside, I stood quietly while the officer spoke. The owner hesitated at first. Then the questions grew precise. Finally, he nodded. Yes, he said. 2 women sold this gold. No names yet. Just facts. I watched his face carefully. Truth always leaves a mark when it is spoken aloud. That moment felt important, not because of justice, but because lies were losing ground. I did not look relieved. I did not look angry. I looked ready, because now, silence was no longer mine alone. Faces meet truth, and confirmation becomes impossible to escape. The room felt different once names entered the air. The officers asked the shop owner to stay where he was. They stepped aside, spoke quietly, and then returned with calm authority. I waited, not with impatience, with certainty. A short while later, Clara and Evelyn were brought in. They walked in the same way people do when they still believe there is a misunderstanding to clear. Straight backs, measured steps. When they saw me, Clara's eyes widened, just slightly. Evelyn's lips pressed together. The shop owner looked up. He did not hesitate. "Yes," he said, pointing gently. "These are the two women." No anger in his voice. No drama. Just fact. That moment settled everything. Clara spoke first, her words tumbling too quickly. Evelyn followed, her tone firm, controlled, rehearsed. I said nothing. I had learned long ago that when truth stands on its own, explanations collapse under their own weight. The officers took notes. The shop owner repeated his confirmation. Again, clearly, I watched my son's wife realize that silence had changed sides. And for the first time since this began, I saw fear not in their faces, but in the space where confidence used to live. Another door opens, and the property they thought was safe comes into the light. After the shop owner's confirmation, the room went still. Not awkward. Decisive. One of the officers looked at me and asked a simple question. "Is there anything else connected to this?" I nodded. "Yes," I said. "A property." The word carried weight. The officers exchanged a look and made a call. A name was given. A time was set. The property seller arrived later that day. He was polite, careful, and clearly nervous. Not because of me, but because truth has a way of making people reconsider their choices. He was shown documents, dates, amounts. He adjusted his glasses and leaned closer. "Yes," he said after a pause. "I sold a seaside property." He named the price without being asked. $4.5 million. The room felt smaller. Then he looked up. "These two women," he added, pointing gently toward Clara and Evelyn. They were the buyers. No hesitation. No confusion. Just confirmation. I felt something settle inside me. Not relief, but completion. Because when money leaves a trail, it always circles back to the truth. Clara's shoulders dropped. Evelyn's posture stiffened. Their silence spoke louder than any defense they could have offered. And in that moment, I knew there was nothing left to uncover. I speak at last, not with anger, but with the wisdom age earned slowly. When everything was confirmed, the room felt lighter. Not because justice had spoken, but because truth no longer needed protection. The officers finished their work. Papers were signed. Statements were complete. My gold was returned. My money came back to where it belonged. But what mattered most to me was not recovery. It was clarity. I finally looked at Clara. She avoided my eyes. I did not raise my voice. I did not ask why. At my age, why no longer matters. Only what you choose to do next does. I turned to my son Daniel. He looked older than he had weeks ago. "Mom," he said quietly, "I should have listened sooner." I placed my hand on his. "No," I said gently. "You listened exactly when you were meant to. That is another lesson age teaches. Timing shapes understanding." I did not celebrate. I did not gloat. Because elders do not win by humiliating others. We win by standing still while truth walks forward on its own. Later that evening, alone in my home, I sat quietly. I thought about patience, about silence, about how the world underestimates people who move slowly. Age does not take strength away. It refines it. And wisdom, real wisdom, is knowing when to speak and when to let actions speak for you. That night I slept peacefully, not because everything was returned, but because I had honored myself.